The galaxy's underestimation. The galaxy was vast and full of powerful civilizations. Each one was more advanced than the last. They had conquered planets, built massive fleets, and created weapons of unimaginable power. In the midst of all this, there was Earth, a small, distant planet that had just begun to explore space. Its people were still learning how to travel beyond their own solar system. To the galaxy, humanity was nothing more than a joke. They saw humans as weak, primitive creatures who had no place in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Earth was just another backwater planet, filled with squabbles and chaos. The other alien species had seen this before. Small civilizations that struggled to keep up with the technological advances of the more powerful species. These civilizations never posed a threat. They were quickly wiped out, absorbed, or ignored. For decades, the galaxy's leaders laughed at humanity's attempts to join the greater galactic community. They mocked their primitive ships, their outdated technology, and their desperate desire to be part of something bigger. No one believed the humans could ever become a threat. They were just another race that would eventually disappear, like so many others before them. But then something happened that changed everything. It started with a small human fleet. At first, no one noticed. A few ships, equipped with basic technology, traveled toward the edge of the galaxy. They were just explorers, the galaxy thought. Just more humans trying to make their way in the stars. The alien races didn't give them a second thought. They were too busy with their own wars and politics to worry about a few ships from a backwater planet. The first encounter happened in the distant reaches of space, far from the major trade routes and alien empires. The humans stumbled into the territory of an alien race known for their strength and cruelty. The aliens, who had long been at war with other civilizations, saw the human fleet as nothing more than an easy target. The humans were not prepared. Their ships were outdated, their weapons underpowered. They had no experience fighting on the galactic scale, but what they lacked in technology and experience, they made up for in determination. When the alien ships arrived, ready to destroy them, the humans did not retreat. They fought back. It was not the kind of battle anyone had expected. The humans had no chance of winning on paper. The aliens had more advanced ships, better weapons, and overwhelming numbers. The humans should have been wiped out without a second thought. But there was something the aliens did not understand. Humans never give up. They never back down from a fight, no matter how impossible it seems. Even in the face of certain death, they fought with everything they had. The battle was chaotic. The human ships dodged laser fire, used clever tactics, and took advantage of every weakness in the alien ships. They were outnumbered, but they weren't scared. They fought like their lives depended on it, because they did. It wasn't a battle of technology. It was a battle of will. And in that moment, humanity's greatest strength was revealed, their unwillingness to surrender. The alien forces were taken by surprise. They had never encountered an enemy like this before. The humans didn't fight fair, and they didn't fight by the rules. They fought to win, no matter the cost. The aliens were forced to retreat. For the first time in galactic history, a human fleet had won a battle against a superior enemy. The victory sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The news spread quickly. How had humans, with their primitive technology, managed to defeat one of the galaxy's most feared races? It didn't make sense. It was impossible. The galaxy had underestimated them. They thought the humans were weak, but they were wrong. The alien leaders were furious. They had written off humanity as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Now, they had to rethink everything. Could humans really be a threat? Were they hiding something? Some began to fear what might happen if humanity ever figured out how to harness their true power. But most dismissed the victory as a fluke, a one-time occurrence that would never happen again. They couldn't have been more wrong. The galaxy's leaders thought they knew everything about humanity. They thought they understood how weak the humans were, how easy it would be to crush them. But the humans had already begun to show a different side of themselves, a side that no one had expected. The galaxy's underestimation of humanity would soon come to haunt them. What the galaxy didn't know was that humanity was just getting started. That one small victory was only the beginning, and the galaxy would soon learn a harsh lesson. Never underestimate the power of a species that has nothing left to lose. The humans may have been small in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but they were far from weak. The galaxy would soon realize that the fury of humanity was unstoppable, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The news of humanity's unexpected victory spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. What had seemed like a fluke was now being questioned. Alien leaders and commanders gathered to discuss what had happened, trying to make sense of the humans' incredible resilience. Many argued that it was just a coincidence, a single battle in a war that would eventually see the humans fall. But a growing number of voices were beginning to change their tune. They were beginning to wonder, could humanity truly be a threat? On Earth, the victory was celebrated. The people had seen their fleet survive against a much stronger opponent, and that filled them with a sense of pride and purpose. But their leaders understood something the rest of the galaxy hadn't yet realized. This was only the beginning. Humanity's victory wasn't just a chance event. It was proof that they could hold their own in the stars. The small, isolated planet that had once been dismissed as insignificant was beginning to make its mark. But the rest of the galaxy wasn't ready to accept this new reality. In the heart of galactic power, the alien rulers were enraged. They could not let this stand. If humanity was allowed to grow unchecked, it would pose a threat to every other species. The power balance of the galaxy could shift in ways they couldn't even imagine. Plans were drawn up in secret, orders were given, and fleets were mobilized. Humanity had to be crushed before they became a real danger. A new mission was set in motion, one that aimed to remind humanity of their place. But what the alien leaders failed to understand was that the humans were already preparing for the storm that was coming. The victory over their enemies had ignited something in the human spirit, a fire that couldn't be extinguished. The humans were no longer content with just defending themselves. They were ready to take on anyone who dared to challenge them. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human military leaders had begun to realize the full scope of their potential. They knew that their technology wasn't the most advanced in the galaxy, but they had something that none of the other species possessed: determination and creativity. They were already beginning to develop new weapons, new strategies, and new ways to defend their planet. They were becoming more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. On the battlefield, human captains were quickly rising to prominence. These leaders were not just tacticians, they were warriors. They understood that winning a war wasn't just about technology or firepower. It was about understanding your enemy and using whatever resources you had to outsmart them. The aliens didn't understand this, and that was where they would fall short. One human captain, in particular, stood out. Captain John Carter had been a part of the fleet that fought the first battle. He had proven himself in combat, but what really set him apart was his ability to think outside the box. When the odds were against him, he didn't retreat. He didn't give up. He found a way to win. His victory against the alien fleet had catapulted him to fame, and his reputation spread quickly throughout human forces. But Carter knew the galaxy wasn't going to sit back and let humanity grow stronger. He understood that the aliens would be coming for Earth soon, and that the next battle would be even more dangerous. He began to prepare his forces for the inevitable conflict. But he also understood something the other human leaders didn't fully grasp. There was a deep well of power inside humanity that had only just begun to show itself. The humans were no longer just a race of explorers. They had tasted victory, and now they wanted more. They wanted to prove to the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Carter's plan wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message. The galaxy had laughed at humanity before. They would not laugh now. The aliens, on the other hand, were growing more desperate. Their fleets, despite being larger and more advanced, had failed to intimidate the humans. The alien leaders knew they couldn't allow this to continue. Their arrogance had clouded their judgment, and now they were facing a very real threat. that the aliens were not about to go down without a fight. They would do whatever it took to defeat the humans. The stage was set for a conflict like no other. Humanity had been underestimated, but the galaxy would soon learn that the price of underestimating humanity was a steep one. The humans were no longer the weaklings they had once been. The storm that had begun with a single battle was only going to grow stronger. And when it hit, nothing in the galaxy would be safe. As the alien fleets moved into position, Captain Carter stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. He knew what was coming. He knew that the galaxy would soon feel the fury of humanity. The galaxy had thought humans were weak. Now they would learn the true meaning of strength. The countdown to war had begun. The news of the alien fleets preparing for war spread quickly through the galaxy. It was undeniable now. Humanity was seen as a threat. Alien leaders who had once dismissed Earth as insignificant now found themselves scrambling to contain the rising power of this unpredictable species. The galaxy was shifting, and the winds of war were howling across every star system. On Earth, the atmosphere was one of focused tension. Captain John Carter and his team knew the challenge ahead would be unlike any they had faced before. It wasn't just about defending their home anymore. It was about survival and making sure humanity's message was heard loud and clear across the stars. The stakes were higher than ever. The first victory had been a symbol, a sign of their potential. But this time, it was not going to be enough to simply hold their ground. Humanity would need to strike first, to show the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. Carter stood in the war room of Earth's main military command, his mind already set on what he needed to do. His strategic mind had always been his strongest asset. It was why he had led humanity's forces to victory in the first battle. But now, the situation had escalated. The aliens had learned from their mistakes and were now coming for Earth in full force. His victory had become their humiliation, and they would stop at nothing to erase that shame. But Carter knew something that the aliens did not understand yet. Humanity was not just a race of soldiers. They were a race of survivors, and survival was their greatest strength. He had seen the determination in his soldiers' eyes, heard the strength in their voices as they prepared for the coming war. Humanity had fought countless battles throughout their history. They had faced down extinction before, and they had always come out stronger. This time, it would be no different. In every major city on Earth, the military was on high alert. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, and strategists worked together to prepare the defenses, create new weapons, and build new ships to defend humanity's most precious asset, their planet. The military was organizing into units with one goal: to outsmart and outfight the enemy. They were aware that they would never have the resources or numbers of the aliens, but they knew that their creativity, resilience, and ability to adapt would give them an advantage. Meanwhile, in space, the human fleet began to mobilize. New ships, specially designed for rapid maneuvering and stealth, began to leave the orbit of Earth. Their purpose was clear: attack. The humans had no intention of waiting for the alien fleet to arrive at their doorstep. They were going to meet them in deep space, where they could fight on their own terms. It was a bold decision, one that could either win them the war or spell their end. Carter's fleet was led by the newly designed warship Titan, a ship that had been built specifically for this mission. The Titan was a symbol of humanity's resolve. It was a massive vessel, bristling with advanced weaponry, but its true strength lay in its speed and maneuverability. Carter knew that the key to winning this war would not lie in sheer firepower, but in being smarter, faster, and more unpredictable than the enemy. As the fleet prepared to launch, Carter's thoughts turned to the alien forces they would face. The aliens were powerful, far more advanced than humanity in terms of technology, but they lacked one key thing: understanding. The aliens had always underestimated humanity, thinking that humans could be controlled, that they could be defeated with ease. But Carter knew that the human spirit was not something that could be easily crushed. In the war room, Carter turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Harper. She was a brilliant strategist in her own right, and had been with Carter through every battle so far. Her steady presence had been a comfort to him, and he trusted her completely. "Lieutenant, what's the status of the fleet?" Carter asked, his voice steady despite the weight of what was ahead. "We're ready, sir," Harper replied, her tone calm and collected. "The ships are equipped, and all pilots have been briefed on the plan. We have a few surprises in store for them." "Sir." Carter nodded. He knew that the key to winning this battle was not just force but surprise. The alien forces would be expecting a traditional battle, with the humans trying to match their firepower. But Carter had other plans. Humanity was going to fight in a way that the aliens wouldn't expect, using their resourcefulness and unpredictability to throw the enemy off balance. "Good," Carter said. "Let's make sure they understand that we are not to be underestimated." The countdown began, and as the Titan and the rest of the fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Humanity had spent too long being viewed as weak. Now they were going to show the galaxy just how wrong that assumption had been. The alien fleets might have the numbers, but humanity had something much more valuable: the will to fight, the will to survive. As the human ships accelerated into space, the first alien ships began to appear on the distant horizon. The stage was set. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The human fleet had been in position for hours, waiting for the first sign of the alien forces. Captain Carter stood on the command deck of the Titan, his eyes fixed on the dark expanse of space. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as his crew prepared for the battle ahead. His mind raced with calculations and strategies, each one more critical than the last. This was not just about winning a war. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. The enemy had underestimated them. They had laughed when they heard about Earth's defenses, thinking it would be an easy conquest. But now it was time to show them the true power of humanity. Carter knew the risks. He understood the cost of failure, but his resolve was unshakable. This was their moment. This was humanity's chance to turn the tide. The alien fleet had finally appeared, a vast armada that stretched across the stars, their ships gleaming with advanced weaponry. For a moment, Carter's eyes narrowed. The enemy ships were massive, their size and firepower intimidating. But that didn't matter. Humans had been outnumbered before, but they had always found a way to survive. "Captain, the enemy is on approach." Harper's voice broke through his thoughts. "We're ready to engage." Carter nodded, his mind now focused on the task at hand. "All ships, prepare for battle. This is not just a fight for Earth. This is a fight for humanity's future. We will make them regret underestimating us." The first strike came faster than expected. The alien forces launched a volley of energy blasts toward the human fleet, the beams of light cutting through the darkness like lightning. But the humans were ready. Carter had expected this, and his fleet was well prepared for the alien tactics. "Now," Carter commanded. The Titan and the rest of the fleet moved swiftly, executing the plan with precision. The human ships didn't engage head-on. They didn't have the numbers to win that kind of battle. Instead, they scattered, using their speed and maneuverability to stay out of the enemy's line of fire. It was a strategy the aliens hadn't anticipated, and it threw their forces into confusion. The humans responded with hit-and-run tactics, firing quick bursts of energy at the alien ships before darting away. It was an unconventional style of combat, one that played to humanity's strengths. Their enemies were slow, predictable, and reliant on brute force. But the humans were nimble, able to adjust in real time, exploiting every weakness in the aliens' formation. For the first few minutes, the humans dominated. Alien ships were destroyed or damaged in quick succession as the human fleet moved like a swarm of predators, attacking from unexpected angles. The Titan led the charge, its advanced weaponry tearing through the alien hulls with deadly precision. But Carter knew this was only the beginning. "We've got them off balance," Harper said, her voice tense but hopeful. "They're starting to panic." Keep the pressure on, Carter replied, his voice steady. They may be disorganized, but they have strength in numbers. We can't afford to make mistakes. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the human fleet was more than a match for the aliens' expectations. The gap between them in terms of technology and firepower was closing, thanks to the humans' ingenuity. Yet Carter couldn't help but feel uneasy. He knew the aliens would adapt. They were quick learners, and they wouldn't be caught off guard for long. Sure enough, within minutes, the alien fleet began to regroup. Their massive warships formed tight clusters, and their strategy shifted to a more defensive posture. They were no longer charging head-on, but instead began to target the human ships with focused, coordinated fire. Their weaponry was powerful, and the human fleet began to suffer casualties. The Titan took a few hits, its shields flickering under the strain, but it held strong. "Shields at 75%, Captain," reported one of the crew members. "We've sustained damage to the port side. Redirect power to the shields," Carter ordered. "Keep the offensive going. They can't adapt if we keep moving." The battle was far from over, and it was becoming clear that the aliens were learning from their mistakes. The initial chaos that had given the humans the upper hand was now turning into a more evenly matched fight. But Carter wasn't worried. This was just the first wave. The alien forces were strong, but they lacked the one thing humanity had in abundance: the will to win. As the alien forces regrouped, Carter saw an opportunity. He had one final move in mind, a risk that would either break the alien forces or push the human fleet into the jaws of defeat. But the risk was necessary. The enemy had to understand that humanity wasn't a species to be trifled with. "Prepare the pulse cannons," Carter ordered. "We're going to hit them where it hurts." The pulse cannons, a powerful new weapon designed for overwhelming energy bursts, had been tested in simulations, but never in actual combat. It was a gamble, but Carter knew the advantage of surprise was his greatest weapon. With the cannons now charged, the Titan and the other ships in the fleet targeted the center of the alien formation. The pulse cannons unleashed a tremendous burst of energy, sending shockwaves through space. The alien ships were caught off guard, their defensive systems overwhelmed by the sheer power of the blast. Ships were torn apart in the blink of an eye, and the alien fleet staggered, momentarily thrown into chaos. "Direct hit," Harper shouted, her voice filled with triumph. But Carter wasn't celebrating just yet. The battle wasn't over, and there was still much to be done. He could feel the adrenaline in his veins, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was just the first strike. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before, but now, the true power of Earth's defenders was beginning to show. As the alien fleet regrouped once more, it became clear that they had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. The war had only just begun, but one thing was certain: the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The battle had shifted. The alien forces were no longer scrambling in confusion. They were calculating, regrouping, and learning quickly. Captain Carter stood at the center of the Titan's command deck, watching the battle unfold on the holographic screens. The alien ships, though still outnumbering the human fleet, had adapted to the human tactics. Their defensive strategies had improved, and their attacks were more coordinated. But Carter wasn't worried. He knew this was the moment that would change everything. For the first time since the start of the fight, the human fleet was on the defensive. The Titan had taken some heavy hits. Its shields were down to 40%, and multiple smaller ships in the fleet were destroyed or critically damaged. Yet Captain Carter didn't show fear. His calm demeanor was infectious. The crew, though feeling the pressure, knew that their captain was always one step ahead. They trusted him, and that trust was their strength. "Status report," Carter demanded, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Shields holding, Captain, but weakening," Harper replied. "The alien fleet is concentrating fire on the Titan." Carter nodded. He had expected this. The enemy had realized that taking down the Titan would cripple the human fleet. But Carter had a plan. He had known they would target his ship. He had prepared for it. And now it was time to put the next phase of his strategy into motion. "We're going to give them a reason to think twice," Carter said, his voice low but resolute. "Prepare the EMP pulses. Get ready to disable their communications." The EMP pulses were a risky weapon, designed to disrupt the electronic systems of enemy ships. The technology was still in its early stages, and there was a chance it might not work, or worse, that it could backfire. But Carter knew that in war, sometimes you had to take risks to win. The crew scrambled to prepare the weapon. The Titan's power systems hummed with intensity as the EMP pulses were primed. The battle outside was reaching a boiling point. The alien ships were closing in, preparing for a final push. They had no idea what was coming. "Firing EMP pulses in 3, 2, 1, Harper said, her finger hovering over the trigger. The pulse was released, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to go still. The bright energy beams from the alien ships slowed, their accuracy faltering. For the first time, the aliens were unsure of their next move. The EMP pulses had worked. Their communication systems were in chaos, and their ships were losing coordination. "Yes," shouted Harper. "It's working, Captain. Their systems are offline." Carter's face remained focused. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The enemy's fleet, now disorganized and crippled, was vulnerable. The humans had gained a crucial advantage. "Now," Carter ordered, his voice steady, "we attack." The human fleet, now free to act without the pressure of facing a coordinated enemy, launched a counterattack. The Titan and its fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The alien ships, struggling to regain their bearings, were overwhelmed. The human fleet hit them from all directions, hammering their vulnerable sides with precise and calculated shots. The once proud alien ships, so confident in their power, were now falling one by one. Their shields were no match for the human weaponry. The Titan led the charge, its pulse cannons delivering devastating blows. The alien fleet, once a massive force, was now crumbling under the humans' relentless onslaught. "Captain, we've got them," shouted one of the crew members. "The enemy is retreating." But Carter wasn't done. He knew that the retreat wasn't a sign of victory yet. The aliens were cunning, and if they had learned anything from the battle, it was that humans could be just as ruthless. He couldn't let them escape, not after everything they had done to his people. "Don't let them get away," Carter commanded, his voice cold and calculated. "Pursue them until they're in no shape to fight back." The human fleet, now fully engaged, pursued the alien ships with deadly precision. The chase was fast and brutal, the alien ships attempting to regroup but failing to outmaneuver the humans. The Titan led the pursuit, its weapons relentless, while the rest of the fleet closed in on the enemy's rear. It didn't take long for the first of the alien ships to surrender. Their leaders knew they had lost. Their forces were shattered, their fleets in disarray. One by one, the alien ships either fled or surrendered, unable to cope with the humans' fury. When the last alien ship limped away, Captain Carter finally gave the order to halt. The battle was won, but the cost was heavy. The human fleet had suffered casualties, and many ships would need repairs. Yet, as Carter surveyed the battlefield, the weight of their victory settled in. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The humans had proven themselves. The galaxy had thought them weak. But now, they knew the truth. "This is only the beginning," Carter said to his crew, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. "We've shown them what we're capable of, but there's more to come." And as the human fleet regrouped, the message was clear. Humanity would not be ignored. The galaxy had just learned to fear them. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy was stunned. News of humanity's victory spread like wildfire across the stars, and the consequences were immediate. The once dismissed humans were now the talk of the galaxy. Everyone, every species, every faction, had underestimated them, but no one could ignore them anymore. Captain Carter stood in the command center of the Titan, looking out at the stars. His fleet was battered but intact, and the feeling of triumph still echoed in the hearts of his crew. The victory was significant, but Carter knew it wasn't enough to secure humanity's place among the stars. He had seen the way the galaxy worked, the power struggles, the alliances, the betrayals. Victory in one battle didn't guarantee peace. In fact, it often made things more complicated. "Captain, we've received messages from several systems," Harper said, breaking Carter's thoughts. "They want to negotiate, form alliances, or some want to know how we did it." Carter nodded. This was expected. The other species would want to learn from humanity's tactics, but they would also be wary of the power the humans now held. There was no telling how some of them would react to the sudden shift in the balance of power. "We can't trust them," Carter said bluntly. "Some of them will try to use us, and some will be planning their next move right now. We have to be prepared." His crew understood. They had seen the ruthless side of the galaxy, and they knew that peace was fragile. But Carter had a plan. He had learned something valuable during this battle. Humanity didn't have to be the strongest to be feared. They didn't have to outnumber their enemies or have the best technology. They just had to be willing to fight harder, to be unpredictable, and to never back down. "Send word to all the fleets. We need to be ready for anything," Carter ordered. As the Titan and its fleet began to repair and refuel, the universe watched. Some factions began to distance themselves, trying to assess the threat humans now posed. Others, seeing an opportunity, sought to build alliances with the humans. The humans were no longer the weak, unproven species. They were a force to be reckoned with. But Carter wasn't focused on the alliances. He wasn't interested in playing politics. He knew that true power didn't come from words. It came from actions. And humanity's actions would speak louder than anything the galaxy's diplomats could say. As the days passed, humanity's reputation grew. The galaxy's leaders could no longer ignore the human fleet. They couldn't dismiss it as a fluke. The humans had proven they could win, and that made them dangerous. Some species saw it as a sign to offer peace, others to prepare for war. But the one thing they all shared was fear of humanity's wrath. It wasn't just the battle that left an impression, it was what came next. The Titan and its fleet were not content with just surviving. They were a symbol of humanity's strength and determination. Every ship, every crew member, embodied the fierce resolve of the human race. They were no longer seen as small players in the vast galaxy. They were warriors, soldiers who had fought and won, and they weren't going to stop. For the first time, the galaxy realized that humans didn't need to be the biggest or the most advanced. They only needed to be willing to fight for what they believed in. As Carter stood at the helm of the Titan, he gazed out into the darkness of space, his mind racing with the possibilities. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before, but it wouldn't make that mistake again. The humans had shown what they were capable of, and now they were ready to take on whatever came next. "Captain, we've received a message from the Zarnok Coalition," Harper said, interrupting his thoughts. "They're requesting a meeting. They want to talk about an alliance." Carter looked over at his crew, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He had expected this. The Zarnok Coalition was one of the largest factions in the galaxy, and their leaders had been quick to see the potential in aligning with humans. But Carter wasn't sure if he could trust them. "Prepare for the meeting," Carter said, his voice low but confident. "But make no mistake, they want something. We'll be careful." The Titan set course for the Zarnok homeworld, and as they traveled, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. The galaxy had been thrown into chaos by humanity's wrath, and now it would be up to them to decide whether they would be allies or enemies. As the human fleet moved closer to the Zarnok capital, one thing was certain: humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. The fear that had once been directed at them was now turned on their enemies, and no one would forget that the humans had proven themselves unstoppable. The galaxy had thought humans were weak, but now they knew. When humanity's fury was unleashed, no one was safe. The Zarnok homeworld was a sight to behold. Towering spires and vast cityscapes stretched across the planet's surface, gleaming under the light of its twin suns. It was a symbol of the Coalition's might, and now it was the site of humanity's next step into the heart of galactic power. Captain Carter and his crew stood ready aboard the Titan, preparing for the upcoming meeting with the Zarnok leaders. But Carter wasn't blind to the risks. This wasn't just another diplomatic talk. It was a game of power and influence, and humanity's presence here would change everything. As the Titan entered orbit, a sleek Zarnok cruiser docked beside them. The sleek, angular ships of the Zarnok were known for their technological superiority. But as Carter looked out at the enemy vessel, he felt an unfamiliar calm. It wasn't fear that settled within him. It was the understanding that humanity had proven itself. And now, the galaxy would have to recognize it. Captain, the Zarnok leaders are aboard their ship. They're ready to speak, Harper reported. Let's meet them then, Carter replied, his tone firm. But remember, we're not here to beg for alliances. We're here to see if they're worthy of it. As they boarded the Zarnok cruiser, Carter couldn't help but notice the way the Zarnok leaders watched him. Eyes cold, calculating. These were not the same creatures who had once laughed at humanity. No, these were beings who had learned to fear the human resolve. It was strange how quickly things could shift, how perceptions could change with a single decisive action. Humanity had shattered the illusion of weakness, and now the galaxy was facing the consequences. The Zarnok leader, a tall, thin being with eyes that seemed to pierce through Carter, stepped forward. Captain Carter, we have heard of your victory. Impressive, the Zarnok said, his voice smooth but edged with suspicion. But victory alone does not make an ally. What do you seek in this galaxy? What is it you want from us? Carter's gaze met the Zarnok leaders. We seek peace, he said plainly. But we won't tolerate any who wish to use us or undermine us. We are here to protect humanity. And if that means standing against the galaxy's threats, we will. There was a silence, a moment where the weight of Carter's words settled in the air. The Zarnok leaders exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. They had been the ones to mock humanity, and now they were faced with the reality of its strength. The tides had turned, and the Zarnok could either accept this new truth or challenge it. Finally, the leader spoke again, his voice slower and more cautious. You are unpredictable, dangerous even, but your strength is undeniable. We propose an alliance, Captain Carter, a partnership. The galaxy will respect you now, and so will we. But remember, there is always a price. Carter smiled, but it wasn't one of friendliness. It was a reminder of the warning he had given at the beginning. There's always a price, he said. But the question is, are you willing to pay it? The Zarnok leader studied him for a long moment before nodding. We'll consider your terms, Captain. But know this, no one can remain neutral forever in this galaxy. We will all be forced to choose sides. Carter's expression hardened. He had heard enough. The galaxy might not have feared humanity before, but now they did. And no one could deny that humanity was playing a dangerous game. But for Carter, this was only the beginning. As he left the Zarnok ship, his mind raced with possibilities. The meeting had gone as expected. Tension, suspicion, and the underlying threat of war. But it had also confirmed something else. Humanity wasn't just a power to be reckoned with. They were the power. The galaxy's landscape was shifting, and there was no turning back. Once back aboard the Titan, Carter addressed his crew. The Zarnok are with us. For now. But we must remain vigilant. The galaxy is unpredictable, and our enemies will only grow more desperate. We've earned their fear, but that fear won't last forever. We must continue to prove that we are unstoppable. As the Titan moved into the next phase of its journey, humanity's wrath was no longer a whispered rumor. It was a reality. The galaxy had learned to fear the humans, But even more importantly, they had learned that no one could ignore humanity when it was in rage. The alliance with the Zarnok was a fragile one, but it was a necessary step in humanity's rise. Carter knew this. He also knew that the true test of humanity's power would come not from what they could destroy, but from how they would use their newfound strength. The galaxy would not bow to them easily, and they would not forgive humanity's audacity. But as Carter stood on the bridge of the Titan, staring out into the stars, he knew one thing for sure: humanity had come to stay. And nothing, not even the stars themselves, would be able to stop them now. The galaxy had underestimated them before, but now they would have to face the truth. Humanity's wrath was unstoppable, and the price of defying it was too high to pay. The silent arrival. In the vast emptiness of space, a quiet tension filled the air. For centuries, the galaxy had known peace, with powerful empires reigning over their territories. Wars were fought and battles won, but all seemed calm now. The fleets of mighty empires were scattered across distant star systems, each empire confident in its strength. Yet, in one far corner of the galaxy, something unexpected was about to happen, something that would shake the very foundation of galactic power. The Galactic Alliance had always been on high alert for new threats, but nothing prepared them for what they were about to face. A strange signal had been picked up, a whisper in the dark void of space. At first, it was dismissed as a mistake, something they had seen 100 times before. But when the signal came again, this time stronger, clearer, and more powerful, alarms blared across the Alliance's central command. On the flagship of the Galactic Alliance, Admiral Vekora stood on the bridge, watching the view screen. The star system in front of her seemed peaceful. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. Yet the signal kept coming, growing stronger with each passing moment. It wasn't like anything they had ever encountered before. "We've traced the signal to this sector," one of the officers reported. "It's coming from an unidentified ship, but we can't get a clear reading. It's almost as if the ship is hiding from our sensors." Vekora frowned. Hiding. A ship in space couldn't just hide. Not from the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. Yet the readings were undeniable. Something was out there, and it wasn't like any fleet they had ever encountered. "Activate the long-range scanners. Find out what we're dealing with," Vekora ordered. Her crew worked quickly, tapping into every available system, trying to get a closer look at the strange presence in the galaxy. The silence on the bridge grew heavier as the seconds passed, each one dragging with uncertainty. Then, without warning, the first image appeared on the screen. A ship, massive, dark, and unlike anything the Galactic Alliance had ever seen. Its shape was sharp, almost jagged, with unfamiliar markings that sent a chill down everyone's spine. It looked like it had been built for war, not exploration. But what caught everyone's attention was the size. It was enormous, too large for any known ship in the galaxy. "We've never seen anything like this before," one of the officers said, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Vekora stared at the ship on the screen, her heart racing. This was no ordinary ship, and the most unsettling thing of all, it wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, hovering above a distant planet, as if waiting. The ship's design didn't fit any known architecture from the galactic empires. It was primitive in appearance, almost crude, yet there was something powerful about it. The size alone was enough to make anyone wonder how such a ship could exist. Was it a forgotten relic from an ancient war? Or was it something new, something dangerous? Vekora ordered the fleet to move in, but cautiously. She wanted to know more, but she also didn't want to make a mistake. As the fleet slowly closed the distance, every officer and crew member felt the weight of the moment. They were not just approaching a strange ship. They were moving toward the unknown. "I want a full scan of that ship," Vekora said firmly. "Do not engage until we know exactly what we're dealing with." The ship remained still, as though it had no intention of moving, but that didn't make it less dangerous. If it was a threat, If it had come here to conquer or destroy, it would be ready. They had to be careful. The entire fleet was on edge, unsure of what would happen next. As the fleet closed in, the strange ship seemed to grow even larger. It loomed over them, casting a shadow across the stars. The silence was deafening. No communication, no sign of life, just the immense, silent presence of the unknown warship. Every officer aboard the fleet could feel their pulse quicken, and for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of fear, real fear. Then, the impossible happened. The massive ship suddenly moved, not in a slow, careful approach, but with the sudden speed of something powerful, something alive. The fleet's sensors couldn't track its movements fast enough. It was as though the ship didn't obey the same rules of space and time that the rest of them did. Evade! Vekora shouted as the crew scrambled to react. The warship fired, and the space around them was suddenly filled with bright, deadly beams of energy. The fleet's ships dodged, but it was clear. This ship wasn't just here to observe. It had come to fight. The first blast from the warship tore through the nearest Galactic ship, ripping it apart in a flash of light. The shockwaves sent ripples through space, shaking the entire fleet. It was a reminder. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a force that no one in the galaxy had expected. Admiral Vekora's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. A human warship. No one had thought humans could build such powerful ships. No one had believed they could even be a threat. But now, humanity had arrived, quietly, without warning, and with terrifying power. The galaxy had just been thrust into a new reality, and no one knew what would happen next. The fleet had barely managed to regroup after the first brutal strike. The massive human warship was like a living nightmare, a machine of destruction that moved through space with terrifying precision. It wasn't like anything Admiral Vekora had ever seen. No known race in the galaxy had the firepower or speed that this ship displayed. Her heart raced, but her mind remained focused. She had to think clearly. The galaxy's safety depended on it. Report. Vekora barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The bridge crew scrambled, their faces pale as they worked frantically to assess the damage. The closest ship to the human warship had been destroyed in an instant. The debris now floated in space, a grim reminder of what they were up against. The remaining ships in the fleet quickly moved to avoid the human warship's deadly fire, but there was no time to celebrate their escape. The enemy was moving again. "We can't track its movements, Admiral," one of the officers shouted. "It's too fast. It's like it's bending space itself." Vekora clenched her fists. This wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon unlike anything they had ever faced. The way it moved, the way it attacked, it was all wrong. It was like the human ship had defied every law of physics, making it nearly impossible to predict its next move. "We need to retreat," another officer urged. "If we don't, we'll be wiped out." Vekora's eyes narrowed. She had been trained for situations like this, but nothing had prepared her for the sudden, terrifying power of this human warship. The entire galaxy had underestimated humans. No one had thought they could build such a vessel, let alone use it with such deadly force. But here it was, attacking without mercy. "No retreat," Vekora said firmly. "We cannot show weakness. The galaxy is watching." She turned to her communications officer. "Send word to all fleets in the sector. Reinforcements are on the way. But they need to be ready for a fight like no other." As the message was broadcast, Vekora's thoughts raced. What kind of warship was this? Who were these humans, and how had they built such a powerful weapon? The galaxy's most advanced ships had been no match for it. The human warship's firepower alone had already shattered their defenses. What else could it do? The silence in space was deafening as the enemy ship hovered, its ominous presence watching. Its sheer size was intimidating, and the power it displayed sent shockwaves through the fleet. But Admiral Vekora wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Prepare the counterattack," Vekora ordered, her voice calm but stern. "We'll hit them hard. Target their engines. We need to stop their movements, or we won't survive this." The fleet's remaining ships took position, but the human warship didn't react right away. It seemed to be studying them, like a predator sizing up its prey. There was no movement, no sign that it intended to attack again. At least not yet. But Vekora knew better than to believe in silence. This ship was not here to negotiate. It was here to win. Then, just as the fleet prepared to fire, a new message flashed on the communication screen. It was from the human warship. "This is your final warning. Leave the sector or be destroyed." Vekora's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected them to speak, and certainly not so boldly. They weren't just here to fight. They were here to conquer. But it wasn't just the message that shook her. It was the calm, unflinching tone of the human voice, as if they knew they were in control. As if they knew they were unbeatable. "We will not leave. This sector is under our protection." Admiral Vekora's jaw tightened. The humans were not just threatening them. They were making a claim. A bold, dangerous claim. And Vekora knew that once the humans made a move, they wouldn't stop. Not until they had achieved their goal. "Prepare to fire on my command," she said coldly. The moment the order was given, the fleet launched a series of missiles toward the human ship. They flew through space, leaving trails of light in their wake, but the human warship didn't flinch. It didn't even seem to notice. Then, in an instant, the warship moved. It was faster than anything the fleet could comprehend. It wasn't just evading the missiles, it was destroying them, one by one, with ease. Beams of light shot out from the warship, slicing through the missiles like they were paper. The fleet watched in horror as their best weaponry was wiped out in seconds. The human ship retaliated immediately. It fired once, and the entire flagship of the Galactic Alliance exploded in a flash of fire and debris. The explosion shook space itself, sending shockwaves through the remaining ships. Vekora stood frozen, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. In one single attack, the human warship had eliminated their strongest vessel. "All ships, retreat," Vekora shouted, realizing they were no longer fighting a battle. They were fighting for survival. The human ship wasn't just powerful, it was unstoppable. The remaining ships scattered, trying to flee from the human warship's relentless assault. But the human ship didn't give them a chance to escape. It followed them, moving faster than anything they could outrun. As the fleet fled into the dark reaches of space, a deep, sinking feeling filled Vekora's chest. The galaxy had just learned the most terrifying truth of all. Humanity was no longer a race to be ignored. They were here, and they had come with the power to destroy. As the human warship continued its relentless pursuit, the galaxy stood still in shock. The news spread like wildfire across every star system, every planetary colony, and every communication network. The galaxy had never faced anything like this. The fleets, the commanders, and the most powerful beings in the galaxy had all underestimated humanity. They had laughed at their weakness, ignored their potential, and now they were paying the price. In the Galactic Council chamber, a hush fell over the representatives of every major race. They were accustomed to diplomacy, to solving problems with talks and treaties. But now, for the first time, they were faced with a situation where no words could help them. The human warship had destroyed their most powerful fleet with terrifying ease. It had demonstrated strength beyond anything they had ever imagined. It was a wake-up call, and no one knew how to respond. Chancellor Velara of the Irian Dominion stood at the head of the council table, her face pale. She was known for her sharp mind and calm demeanor, but even she couldn't mask the fear that had gripped her heart. "How did this happen?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. How did the humans build such a warship? A representative from the Xerian Empire, an insectoid race known for their vast intelligence, spoke up, his voice a low buzz. "We've underestimated them for too long. The human fleet has always been small, disorganized. But they've been quietly advancing their technology. They must have kept their true power hidden, waiting for the right moment." "But why now?" asked a voice from the Vrelian delegation. Why did they strike at us? We've had peaceful relations with them for centuries. The room fell silent at the question. The Vrelians were known for their trade and peaceful nature, and they had never been at odds with the humans. But now, they found themselves under threat. A loud bang echoed through the council chamber as a communication terminal powered on. It was a message from the human warship. The screen flickered, and a calm, emotionless voice echoed through the room. "This is Captain Solus of the United Human Federation. This sector is now under our control. Any who resist will face the consequences. Leave or be destroyed." The room was frozen. The voice was cold, confident, and powerful. There was no sign of fear, no hesitation in the message. The humans were declaring war, and they were not asking for permission. "We must act," Valera said, her voice regaining its usual strength. "This cannot go unanswered. We must unite to stop this threat. We cannot let them gain control of the entire sector." The council erupted into heated discussions, some calling for immediate action, others urging diplomacy. But one thing became clear. No one was prepared for this. The galaxy's leaders had never been forced to come together like this. There was no previous record of a species so dangerous and determined. Humanity had not only built a warship capable of destroying their fleets, they had also demonstrated the willingness to use it. The message from Captain Solus echoed in their minds. The galaxy was no longer a peaceful place. It was on the brink of war, a war that the humans had started. And it seemed they were ready for it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the residents of the human-controlled sector watched in awe. They had lived in relative peace for decades, knowing their military power was growing but never expecting such a bold move. The Human Federation had built the most advanced technology, but it was never flaunted. Until now. On the human flagship, the Vanguard, Captain Solus stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the galaxy map. His face was calm, but inside, a fire burned. He had led his crew through battles. But this was different. This wasn't just a mission. This was the beginning of something far greater. "Sir," the comm officer said, looking over the data, "we've received communication from the Galactic Council. They're gathering forces to confront us." Captain Solus nodded slowly. "Let them come. We are ready." The crew moved in synchronized precision, preparing for the next phase. They knew what was at stake. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. They had arrived, and they would not be ignored. "Prepare for the next phase of the operation," Solus ordered. "We're going to take the fight to them. Make sure they understand that we will not be stopped." His officers nodded, and the massive warship began to move again. This was no longer a game. The humans were making their presence known, and they weren't just here to survive. They were here to dominate. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the leaders began to come to a grim consensus. There would be no negotiations, no peaceful resolution. The humans had made their intentions clear. They had taken the first step in what would likely be a long and bloody conflict. "We'll need every fleet in the galaxy," Valera said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll form alliances, rally our forces. But this war won't be easy." The representatives nodded, each knowing that the road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was certain: humanity had changed the game. The galaxy would never be the same again. As the council adjourned, the stars above seemed darker, as if even the universe itself was holding its breath. The war had begun, and no one knew just how far the humans were willing to go. The silence that had gripped the galaxy was slowly replaced with a growing sense of unease. As the human warship continued its journey through the galaxy, it wasn't just the Galactic Council that was taking notice. The species that had long thought themselves invincible, the ones who had never considered humans a true threat, were beginning to mobilize. Admiral Harkov of the Draken Empire stood on the bridge of his warship. The glory of Draken, his face grim. His fleet was one of the most powerful in the galaxy, capable of taking down entire star systems with ease. Yet now, as he stared at the intelligence reports on his screen, He couldn't help but feel a knot in his stomach. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had destroyed the Zion fleet in an act of calculated precision, and they had done it with a warship that was unlike anything he had ever seen. He turned to his crew, his voice steady but filled with authority. "Prepare the fleet. We'll meet them head-on. The galaxy needs to see that we will not bend to these newcomers." His officers moved quickly, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. The Draken Empire had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist for centuries. Now, for the first time in their history, they were facing an unknown enemy, one that didn't follow the usual rules of war. The humans had not only built a warship of immense power, they had used it without hesitation. They were not afraid. Meanwhile, Captain Solus stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, overseeing the final preparations for the next stage of their campaign. The mission was clear: strike fast, strike hard, and send a message. He had no intention of backing down. The humans had long been underestimated by the galaxy, but now it was time to show everyone what they were truly capable of. "Captain, the Draken fleet has entered our sensor range," the comm officer reported, her voice tense. Solus nodded. "It's time." The Vanguard and its accompanying warships powered up their weapons. The human fleet was small, but it had the element of surprise. The Draken, with all their might, were about to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. "We've studied their weaknesses," Solus said, his voice calm. "Now let's see if they can survive when they can't predict what we'll do next." The Draken fleet moved in formation, confident in their numbers and firepower. But even as they approached, the vastness of space seemed to close in on them, tightening with each passing second. They expected the humans to fight in the usual way, staying hidden behind shields, sending waves of fighters to wear them down. But the humans had no intention of fighting like everyone else. As the two fleets closed in, the Vanguard fired its first shot. A single pulse of energy, sharp and precise, slammed into the front of the Draken fleet. It wasn't just an attack. It was a statement. The human warship wasn't here to play by anyone's rules. The Draken fleet responded immediately, launching waves of fighter ships and missiles. But before they could even get close, the Vanguard released another volley, cutting through the fighters like they were made of paper. It was clear the humans had designed their warship with one thing in mind: devastation. Admiral Harkov gritted his teeth as he watched the destruction unfold on his monitors. "What is this?" he muttered. "How are they so powerful?" The Vanguard didn't just fire in one direction. It moved with fluidity, changing course, making it nearly impossible to predict its next move. The Draken fleet struggled to keep up, and before long, the first of their ships began to fall, torn apart by the precise strikes from the human warship. It was a sight that filled the galaxy with terror. The Draken Empire, one of the most feared forces in the galaxy, was being overwhelmed by a species they had thought of as insignificant. Back at the Galactic Council, the representatives sat in stunned silence. The reports were coming in fast, and they were all the same. The Draken fleet, once thought to be invincible, was being decimated by the human warship. It wasn't just a battle. It was a massacre. "How did this happen?" Chancellor Villara whispered, her voice shaking. "We thought we were prepared. We thought we understood them." The Zirian representative was the first to speak, his voice laced with dread. "We underestimated them. The humans have been hiding their power, waiting for the right moment to strike." "But why didn't we see this coming?" a Vrelian delegate asked. "They've always been so small. Their fleet was never a threat." "No," Villara replied, her voice hardening. "They were never a threat until now." Back in the heart of the battle, the Vanguard continued its onslaught. The Draken ships were crumbling, unable to respond to the human warship's speed and power. It wasn't just their weapons that made the humans dangerous. It was their strategy, their unpredictability. "Admiral," one of his officers said, his voice shaking with fear, "we can't hold out much longer. The human warship is unstoppable." Admiral Harkov's face was a mask of fury. "We are Draken. We will not surrender. But even as he shouted those words, he knew deep down that it was too late. The humans had already won. The first strike had been delivered, and it had sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. The Vanguard powered down its weapons, leaving the battlefield in ruins. The human fleet had done what it had set out to do, deliver a crushing blow to one of the galaxy's most powerful forces. But this was only the beginning. Captain Solus knew the galaxy would respond, but he was ready. Humanity had made its mark, and it wasn't going anywhere. The war had truly begun, and it would take everything the galaxy had to stop them. As the Vanguard sailed toward its next objective, Solus's voice rang out on the command deck. Prepare for the next phase. We're not done yet. The devastation left behind by the Vanguard's assault was not something the galaxy could easily ignore. The destruction of the Draken fleet sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, rattling the core of the Galactic Council and every major power in the region. No one had anticipated the human warship would unleash such devastating power. But now, the truth was undeniable. Humanity had come to the galaxy, and they had arrived with a force that could not be ignored. The Galactic Council was in chaos. Representatives from various species sat in tense silence, looking over the reports of the battle. The once powerful Draken Empire had been torn apart in a matter of hours. No one knew exactly how the humans had done it, but the results spoke for themselves. Many in the council were beginning to question their earlier assumptions about humanity. "We've made a terrible mistake," Chancellor Villara said gravely, her face pale. "The humans are not to be underestimated. We thought they were weak, insignificant, but they've proven us wrong." The Xerian delegate, a tall, blue-skinned being, spoke up. "This is not just a mistake. This is a threat we cannot ignore. If the humans can do this to the Draken, what will they do to the rest of us? We cannot afford to let them grow stronger." Villara nodded. "We need to make a decision. We can't let this slip any further." Across the galaxy, similar discussions were taking place. The Draken were not the only power that had underestimated humanity. The Orcs, a race known for their speed and cunning in battle, began mobilizing their fleet. The Shurians, a massive species known for their brute strength, sent word to their warlords, instructing them to prepare for what was to come. But even as the galaxy's powers began to stir, humanity was already a step ahead. On board the Vanguard, Captain Solus stood at the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the stars. His mind was focused, calculating the next moves. He had led the humans to this point, but he knew that what came next would determine the course of their future. The galaxy was no longer a place for quiet explorers. It had become a battleground, and the Vanguard was humanity's weapon. "Captain, the messages are coming in," Lieutenant Thorne said from the communications console. "The Galactic Council is calling for a meeting. They're demanding we explain ourselves." Solus raised an eyebrow. He had expected this. The galaxy was trying to figure out how to deal with the humans, and they didn't like the fact that humanity had risen so quickly and with such devastating force. He looked at his crew, his face hardening. "We won't explain ourselves. We've done nothing wrong. But we will respond. Prepare the fleet. We're heading to the Council's meeting." The Vanguard was not the only ship under human command. Though their fleet was small compared to the established powers in the galaxy, the humans had a few more surprises up their sleeves. There were other ships, other war machines, hidden in the vastness of space, ready to join the fight. And with every passing day, the humans were growing stronger, their understanding of the galaxy and its technologies expanding rapidly. As the Vanguard made its way toward the Galactic Council's headquarters, Captain Solus couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even more dangerous. The galaxy wasn't going to accept humanity's rise without a fight, and the coming battles would push both sides to their limits. But humanity had always been at its strongest when pushed to the edge, and Solus knew that the humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to make their mark on the galaxy. They had already proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's greatest powers. Now, they would prove that they could dominate. At the Council's meeting hall, tension hung thick in the air. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy had gathered, their faces set in grim expressions as they awaited humanity's response to the devastation they had caused. The doors to the meeting chamber opened with a sharp hiss, and Captain Solus stepped inside. He was flanked by his crew, all standing tall and confident despite the gravity of the situation. As they walked toward the center of the room, the representatives of the galaxy's powers turned their eyes on them, some with suspicion, others with outright hostility. Chancellor Villara was the first to speak. Her voice was cold, but there was a trace of fear hidden behind her words. Humanity, you have caused the destruction of an entire fleet. The Draken Empire is no more because of you. Explain yourselves. Solus met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. We've done nothing but defend ourselves. The Draken thought they could push us around, like every other race in this galaxy. They were wrong. And now, you all know what happens when you underestimate humanity. He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, all eyes on him. We're not here to ask for permission, Solus continued. We're here because we have every right to be. We've fought wars on Earth, and we've won. You may not like it, but humanity will not bow to anyone. We will not kneel to the so-called powers of the galaxy. A Mercan delegate, a reptilian species with sharp eyes and a long tail, hissed in anger. You are arrogant. The Draken may have been weak, but we are not. You will pay for your insolence. Solus raised an eyebrow. Let's see if you can make us pay. The room buzzed with rising tension, but Solus remained calm. He had already done what needed to be done. The message was clear. Humanity was not afraid. And no matter what the galaxy's powers did next, humanity was ready. The tension in the galaxy had reached its peak. After humanity's unexpected and brutal display of power, the balance of power was shifting. The once confident leaders of the galaxy were now questioning their own strategies. The attack on the Draken fleet had not just destroyed ships, it had shattered the illusion of their invincibility. Now the question on everyone's mind was, what would humanity do next? In the vast halls of the Galactic Council, representatives were beginning to recognize that their worst fears were coming true. Humanity was no longer a distant, insignificant species. They were a force to be reckoned with. And while some were still trying to downplay the threat, others were already planning their retaliation. Chancellor Villara, we cannot ignore this any longer, said General Torak of the Shurians. His massive frame loomed over the table, his voice booming as he spoke. The humans are clearly capable of destroying entire fleets. If we don't act now, we may find ourselves next on their list. Villara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The Shurians were a powerful race, known for their overwhelming strength, but even they couldn't deny the devastation caused by the Vanguard. The galaxy's power structure was teetering on the edge, and no one could predict what would happen next. The representative from the Orcs, a species of sharp-minded and fast-moving warriors, leaned forward. The Draken were too proud and too arrogant to see what was coming. We're different. We won't make the same mistake. We will prepare. We will strike first. Villara raised a hand, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the room. We don't know enough about their capabilities. If we strike now, we risk provoking a war we cannot win. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and Villara's words hung in the air like a cloud of uncertainty. The Vanguard's arrival had changed everything, and no one could agree on how to proceed. Far from the council chambers, Captain Solus was preparing for the next phase of humanity's rise. The Vanguard was now in orbit around a remote, uncharted world, perfectly positioned to monitor the galaxy's growing response to their actions. Solus and his crew had expected retaliation, but they weren't afraid. They were ready. Captain, we're getting reports from several systems, Lieutenant Thorne said, stepping into the bridge. The Shurians are mobilizing their forces. The Orcs are gathering intelligence. The rest of the galaxy is reacting. Solus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. They'll come, and when they do, we'll be waiting. He turned his gaze to the vast expanse of stars outside the Vanguard's windows. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. Now, humanity had the chance to rewrite the rules, to take its place among the stars. We've shown them our strength, Solus continued. Now it's time to show them our resolve. Meanwhile, on a distant world, the Draken survivors were nursing their wounds. The Draken Empire, once a force feared across the galaxy, was now broken. Many of their ships had been destroyed in the battle with the Vanguard, and their fleets were scattered to the farthest corners of space. But they were not ready to admit defeat. They were determined to rise again. Emperor Thilak, the leader of the Draken Empire, sat upon his throne. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the reports coming in. The loss had been catastrophic, but it had not broken him. He could still feel the burning desire for vengeance. They think they can destroy us. Thilak growled, his voice filled with venom. They think we're finished. But we will rise again. We will rebuild our fleets, and we will make the humans pay for their insolence. His advisors gathered around him, their expressions grim. Your Majesty, the humans have proven themselves to be a force unlike any we've encountered. We must be cautious. A direct confrontation may not be wise. Thilak slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne, his anger flaring. Caution is for the weak. We will not be reduced to prey. The humans will understand that they made a grave mistake. The Draken Emperor's eyes glinted with fury as he began making plans to retaliate. But deep down, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had caught the galaxy off guard. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. Back in the heart of the Vanguard, Captain Solus stared out into the dark expanse of space. The response from the galaxy had been swift. The Shurians, the Orcs, and even the Draken were mobilizing their fleets, preparing for a confrontation. But Solus remained calm. Humanity had been tested before, and they had always come out on top. Captain, Lieutenant Thorne said, her voice urgent, we've detected multiple fleets moving toward our position. It's starting. Solus stood tall, his voice steady and commanding. Let them come. The crew of the Vanguard was ready. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the storm that was about to break. The galaxy had underestimated them once, and now, humanity was going to show them the full force of their power. The first battle had been just a glimpse of what was to come. The real test was now. The storm was gathering, and humanity was ready to face it head-on. Far across the galaxy, in the darkness of space, hundreds of warships, each one a symbol of the galaxy's might, were on their way. But they were not the only ones on the move. Humanity's response was already in motion, and as the two sides drew closer, the galaxy held its breath. The fate of countless worlds was about to be decided. The galaxy was holding its breath. The fleets of the Shurians, the Orcs, the Draken, and many other species were now on their way to confront the human warship that had sent shockwaves across the universe. The silence in space was deafening, as if even the stars themselves were waiting for what would come next. The Vanguard stood alone in the vast expanse, its dark silhouette a haunting reminder of what humanity had become. Captain Solus stood on the bridge, watching the sensor readings carefully. The entire galaxy was marching toward them, but they had no fear. The crew was ready, and they were determined to show the universe that humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. Lieutenant Thorne, her voice calm but sharp, broke the silence. Captain, the enemy fleets are coming into range. They're still not in firing range, but they're getting closer. Solus nodded, his expression hardening. Prepare the weapons. We will not be caught off guard again. This time, we end it. The tension in the air was thick. Every crew member aboard the Vanguard was focused, every system powered up and ready to unleash destruction. The threat of the enemy was undeniable, but humanity had something the galaxy didn't expect: unity, determination, and the raw strength of those who had survived against all odds. The human fleet might have been small, but it was deadly, and they were ready for a fight. The first shot came without warning. A brilliant beam of energy erupted from the Lid Surian warship, cutting through the darkness of space. It was followed by a series of blasts from the Orcs ships. The alliance of fleets had decided to strike first, hoping to overwhelm the Vanguard before it could retaliate. But they were making a grave mistake. The Vanguard absorbed the first wave of blasts with ease. Its shields flared brightly, glowing as they deflected the enemy's attacks. Then, without hesitation, the Vanguard fired back. The weapon's power was unimaginable. A concentrated beam of energy erupted from the ship, cutting through the Surian fleet like a knife through paper. One by one, their warships disintegrated into nothingness, their remains scattering across the void of space. The Orcs ships were next. The human warship moved with deadly precision, striking at its enemies with calculated force. What just happened? General Torak of the Surians gasped, watching in disbelief as their warships were wiped out in mere seconds. The overwhelming power of the Vanguard was beyond anything they had prepared for. Solus stood calmly on the bridge, his eyes scanning the chaos unfolding on the screen. This is the price of underestimating humanity. Far across the galaxy, the Draken Empire was watching with growing fear. Emperor Thelak had been certain that their combined strength would be enough to bring humanity to its knees, but the Vanguard had proven otherwise. His mind raced as he realized that their only hope now was to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. "Your Majesty, the humans are unstoppable," one of his advisors said in a low, fearful voice. "We've never seen anything like it. Our fleets are being destroyed before they even get close." Thalak's eyes burned with rage. "They have won the first battle, but the war is far from over. We will rebuild, we will fight, and we will make them regret ever challenging us." But even as he spoke, deep down, he knew the truth. The galaxy's might was crumbling. Humanity's warship had shown them a level of power they had never imagined, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. Back on the Vanguard, the battle was reaching its peak. The enemy fleets were decimated, their remaining ships retreating into the darkness of space. The human warship had emerged victorious, but the victory came at a cost. The crew was battered, and the ship itself had taken damage. However, the outcome was clear. Humanity had proven its strength, its resolve, and its ability to stand against even the mightiest forces in the galaxy. Captain Solus stood on the bridge, his face grim but satisfied. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The galaxy would not forget the shock and terror humanity had unleashed. And now, humanity had to decide what to do with their newfound power. "We've won the battle," Solus said, his voice steady. "But the war isn't over. We need to be prepared for what's next. The galaxy will come after us, but we will be ready." Lieutenant Thorne nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "The galaxy won't forget what we've done, and neither will we." Solus turned to face his crew, his expression hardening. "This is just the beginning. Humanity has proven that we can take on the galaxy and win. Now we take that power and ensure that no one ever forgets who we are." The crew of the Vanguard stood tall, their faces set in determination. The universe had learned a hard lesson. Humanity had arrived, and it wasn't going anywhere. The galaxy had fallen silent. The warships that had once filled the stars with their power and pride were now broken, scattered, and defeated. The Vanguard stood as the symbol of humanity's strength, a warship that had turned the tides of battle and rewritten the rules of the galaxy. The terror that had spread with the arrival of humanity's warship was now a permanent part of the galaxy's history, and as the Vanguard sailed into the darkness of space, it was clear to everyone. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. No one would ever forget the day when humanity's warship entered orbit, and the galaxy fell silent.